Hey guys, welcome back to World of Tanks. My name is Bruce and today I want to give you 10 golden tips for heavy tank gameplay. Let's go. I already made lots of tutorials, feel free to check them out. I will link some of them in this video starting right here. Today I want to make a little heavy tank tutorial and share 10 golden tips and tricks for heavy tank gameplay. I think there is more to heavy tank gameplay than just armor, but let me show you what I mean with some gameplay and directly start with 10 tips in order to become a better heavy tank player. Alright, first game in the E75, and in this video I do not want to explain too much about the different maps, but I want to give you 10 golden tips for heavy tank gameplay. And so let's start right away with the first tip, and that is you have to become an expert on your armor. So try to take a look at tanks.gg, see where the strength of the armor is, and then try to angle your tank in order to use this armor so not to get penetrated by your adversary tanks. So let's take a look and see what the armor profile of the E75 looks like. So this is the armor profile of the E75, and as you can see, it basically only has two weak spots, one of which is the lower hull, which is pretty huge, and then the cupola, maybe apart from those two little ports here on the right hand side and then on the left hand side, but those are relatively small and therefore tough to hit. So of course, if one loads premium ammunition, then the armor becomes weaker, but let's concentrate on the standard ammunition. And so how can you make use of the armor profile of this tank? Well, this tank is a perfect side scraper. So what you want to do is you want to turn your tank to the side, and then as you can see, the armor becomes insanely strong. Not only can you make the lower hull relatively strong, 245 up to 271, and then the only remaining weak spot basically is the cupola. So this is how you can basically use the armor of this tank. Another option is to simply play hull down and to hide the lower hull behind cover, and then basically the only remaining weak spot once again is the cupola. So this is how you can make use of the strong armor of the E75. Alright, so now we know everything we need to know about the armor of the E75. So let's talk about the next tip, and that is something that some players, or actually a lot of players, do wrong if they play a heavy tank. So tip number 2 is be engaged in the battle, and that sounds kind of easy, but you do not want to waste time with a flanking maneuver. You want to be engaged in the battle as soon as possible and as long as possible, i.e. you do not want to waste any time with driving around and with being useless, because what counts for a heavy tank is to be engaged in a fight and to either annihilate the adversary tanks or to buy your team time, and we'll come to this later. So that is super important, and most of the time, due to the heavy armor that a heavy tank carries with it, you are slow, and so you simply cannot afford to make a mistake and to waste time for your team. Now the next tip is choose your fighting position wisely. As your mobility is not good, you must not drive to a forward position and isolate yourself, because depending on the situation and depending on the acting of the adversary team, your flank will either be outnumbering the adversary tanks or you will be outnumbered. And so you have to take a look at what is going on the map. You have to take a look at the team composition of your own team and then of the adversary team, and then you have to make an assessment how many players are supporting you in their heavy tanks, and you also have to make an assessment whether the adversary heavy tanks are proceeding to your position. because it is critical to not play too aggressively and too far forward, because due to the fact that your mobility is lackluster in general in a heavy tank, you will not be able to quickly leave the position just like in a medium tank or in a light tank. And so once you've committed yourself to a certain flank and to a certain position, chances are that you will not be able to fall back. And so you have to choose your position wisely at the beginning of the game, and you have to think about it and about the team composition. And alongside with this tip comes my next tip, and that is don't be too close to adversary tanks, because in a heavy tank in general your alpha damage is high, and so your reload is very long. And so if you are playing too close to adversary tanks, chances are that those tanks will use the reload time of your tank in order to push you out. So one, of course, this does not happen if you have a lot of support from your team, but sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you do not have too many tanks fighting with you. And in such a situation, it is crucial to have a certain distance between you and the leading edge of the adversary heavy tanks, so that the chance of being pushed out is reduced. Because after all, the only strong portion of your armor in general is the frontal portion, and as soon as other tanks push you out, just like we do in this situation with the Type 5, they can take shots onto your side, and that's where your armor is weak and where you will get penetrated. Alright, and tip number 5 is try to only face your adversary tanks frontally. If you get flanked, then your armor is not working anymore, because you should always try to put the armor, the frontal armor of your tank, towards the enemy tanks, and that kind of goes together with the previous tip as I just mentioned. Okay, second game in the E75. This time we spawn on Manaheim line once again in a tier 10 match, and let's instantaneously proceed with the next 5 tips. So tip number 6 is you have to assess the minimap. And yeah, I know that most of the heavy players actually do not care about the minimap too much. They simply rush into a position that they deem is useful, and but the rest is basically yeah, they don't care about the rest. So in my opinion, that is not good. You should try to look at the minimap and assess how strong your flank is played. So what do I mean? Either if you play on a flank, typically on the heavy flank, either you are outnumbered by the adversary team, and in this case you should try to buy time for your team, try to play a bit more defensively with the tips that I just mentioned, and buy your team time so that the team has enough time to win the other side of the map, and then to maybe flank around the adversary heavy tanks that you are brawling against, and then try so that your team has the chance of winning the game. On the other hand, if you see that you are outnumbering the tanks on your flank, then you should try to play aggressively, and alongside with your team try to push out the tanks and try to win your flank, because chances are that your team will be inferior on the other flank. And so if you play cautiously and defensively, then chances are that the opposite will happen. The other team will win the other flank, and then sooner or later you will get flanked in your heavy tanks, and then the game is basically lost, because you have no chance to win a situation in which multiple adversary tanks will be able to shoot your tank from multiple directions. So that is super important even in a heavy tank. Now, tip number 7 is try to make the first shots count. If it takes premium ammunition to do so, then use premium ammunition. Once you manage to take out one tank, usually this will help you to further on win the flank. And if you manage to reduce the HP of an adversary heavy tank significantly with the very first shots, then what happens is usually this tank will play more defensively, will fall back, and all of a sudden you will be situationally outnumbering the other tanks, and then chances are that the other team will simply collapse. So it is crucial to make the first shots count, and if you have to use premium ammunition, do so. You can save premium ammunition later on in the game. Alright, next tip is use your equipment, or use the equipment to boost your firepower and maybe your mobility in some tanks, but certainly not your view range. You will be brawling in close quarters combat and with a very narrow distance to the adversary tanks, and so boosting the view range, for example, is usually useless in a heavy tank. But what you want to do is you want to increase the firepower, because the firepower is the strong point of your tank anyway, and so that's what you want to do. Tip number 9 is never fight on a flank on your own. You should never isolate yourself, because due to your high alpha gun, you have a huge reload and you will get pushed out and you will get out DPM'd and flanked by other tanks as soon as you have taken a shot. So holding one flank with a single heavy tank is usually not possible, due to the fact that yeah, you will simply get pushed out. So yes, you are a heavy tank, and yes, you have superior armor, but most likely you will not manage to win an engagement against multiple adversary tanks. And I mean, this is, for example, why I do not like to push aggressively down to the what is it, the H9 position where all the other heavy tanks went, but to stay in this position, because in this position I cannot get pushed out as easily as in a more aggressive position. All right, and finally, tip number 10 is, if you are a top tier tank, try to fight against the most dangerous enemy top tier heavy tank. If you are not fighting against your direct competitor, then you leave this burden to your team, and chances are that the low tier tanks, even multiple low tier tanks, will not be able to successfully fight against your competitor if you are in a top tier heavy tank. Your firepower is insanely insane, and is so much better than compared to the other heavy tanks, which are then low tier. And so you have to make sure that you share the burden, and that you also try to fight against the strongest adversary enemy heavy tank. All right, and I think if you follow those 10 tips, then you will be successful in your heavy tank, and you will be able to win the games at least easier than compared to not adhering to those tips and tricks. And so yeah, okay, so in this game I was able to hold the flank, and I was not playing too aggressively, too offensively. Instead, I went to a more defensive position, a position which is super strong and in which you cannot get pushed out easily, and it kind of played out, and we did a good job. I already made 2,300 damage, plus I did not lose a single HP, and that's what you should also do in a heavy tank. You should try to preserve your HP. I'm always talking about this in medium tanks and also in light tanks, in order to make an aggressive push at the end of the game, to consciously then trade your HP. However, in a heavy tank, this is also the case. You should also try to make your armor work to not lose a single HP, so that you can then decide when to consciously trade in your HP in order to make a game-winning move. That's what you want to do. Okay, so side shot onto the object to, what is it, 257, and now we have basically map control, and due to the fact that we have preserved all our HP, we can now play aggressively and move forward into the enemy base. Of course, even now I do not want to throw away my tank and simply yeah, give away my HP, so I want to see what option I have. However, there are only now 3 adversary tanks in the game. Can we take a shot onto this tank? Okay, we do not hit. Of course, if you're playing a heavy tank, chances are that you have not the precise gun and you are not a perfect sniper, so that's just how it is. But let's fully aim in. That's, by the way, something that you should always do. And voila, we managed to take out the Stritzwang S1, and we have won the game. All right, so let's now take a look at the third game and see what we can achieve if we follow those 10 tips. Okay, third and last game in the E75, once again in a tier 10 matchup. And I think we do not need to take a look at the map because, I mean, what options do we have? Only one. We have to go to the city and we have to brawl against the other heavy tanks, and that's exactly what we want to do. Now, in a heavily armored tank like the E75, chances are that your armor is actually one of the best ones in the game, even if you fight in a tier 10 battle. Because take a look at the adversary team. There's an Object 780, which is also, of course, strongly armored. However, I would consider the armor of the WZ55 inferior, as well as the armor of the M5Y. So we want to go to the city, as I said, and then make our armor work. But play smart, and we want to try to not lose our HP right from the get-go, and we'll see how it goes. In general, even in a heavy tank, it is beneficial to see what is going on, to kind of make an assessment, and to not play over aggressively at the beginning of the game. So here we go. We want to side scrape against this tank. Here's, you know, nice. There's the T95 crossing, and that's the first 599 damage. So as you can see, the adversary team is playing aggressively. Our reload, unfortunately, is not quick enough in order to get a shot onto the Char Future 4, who is doing a bad job because brawling frontally against adversary tanks is not what you want to do in the Char Future 4. But that's just how it is. Okay, so as long as we side scrape, we should have a good chance of not getting... Oh, okay, I didn't hit the lower hull. I think the lower hull of the Object 780 is actually pretty strong, at least if it is angled like in this situation. Okay, and go, let me see. So what we want to do is we want to keep side scraping because that's the definite strength of the E75, and we simply want to wait until adversary tanks make mistakes, because then we can punish them and then we can reduce the HP of the adversary tanks, and that's what we want to do because as I just mentioned earlier, with reduced HP of the adversary team, then we will finally have the chance of pushing them out. Okay, so the enemy tanks, enemy heavy tanks are flanking us. So we need to turn around and then try to help our team out. So let's see how it goes. Let's see whether the WZ55 is making an aggressive push. I want to fall back a little bit in order to get a better angle onto this tank, because I do not want to find myself in a situation where I get flanked in my heavy tanks. So let's go to this position right here. And let's see whether this tank plays aggressively. Looks like no, he doesn't. But maybe I can get a shot onto this tank. Here you go. Once again, the side of the T95. Excellent. And yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. T95, for giving me this opportunity. Right now, looks like the game is on the losing side. The adversary team has already managed to win the other flank. However, the good thing on Ensk in a heavy tank or for a heavy tank player is that there are multiple options to fall back and then to still have cover with the buildings here in this city map. Okay, go. Nice. We are using the reload of the WZ55 in order to take a shot. And you know what? Now we might be able to side scrape, but we have to take a close look onto what is going on the other side. And you know what? I think we need to turn around and be prepared for the ST1 to arrive and then to make more damage. But you know what? I do not want to isolate myself, so I do not want to fall or push forward into this position, because yeah, if I had fallen or if I had moved into this position, I would have had to face those 3 tanks all on my own, which I do not want to do, just like I mentioned earlier. But as our team, as our heavy tank in the heavy tanks in the city have already moved forward and pushed out the other tanks a bit, there's the chance to fall back at least a little bit. Okay, here we go. Nice. And of course, if this tank makes such a mistake, then we will be able to push him out. Object tries to help this player, so we want to turn around because, yep, the M103 is able, of course, to take out this tank. Object doesn't manage to penetrate us, and we can take a shot. And well, unfortunately, he is still alive, but that should not be a problem because now we can take him out. He is just shot, and he is taken out. Excellent. Okay, perfect. So we were able to actually turn around the game with the strong defensive gameplay in the city, and as long as you manage to basically show this the strong part of your armor to adversary tanks, and as long as you manage to not get flanked and pushed out, then you are on the goods in a good shape, and you will be able to successfully employ your heavy tanks. So in my opinion, playing a heavy tank is all about knowing the armor profile of your tank, plus reading the situation and finding a place in which you can make your armor work, but then also a place which enables you to maintain a life, and a place in which you cannot easily get pushed out. And if you find such a spot, then you can simply dominate the adversary team and also use the strength of your tank in the game. And I think this is the combination which lets you be successful in World of Tanks. All right, so yeah, I hope those 10 tips which are displayed right here help you out. And another fantastic result in the E75. And yeah, I hope you enjoy playing heavy tanks. And I hope you can manage to basically follow those 10 tips. Yeah, and so all in all, I think playing heavy tanks, like heavy tanks are a strong tank class, but just like in medium tanks or just like in tank destroyers, you have to know what you are doing. Alright guys, that was it for today with my first heavy tank tutorial. Do you like to play heavy tanks? Did you find some of the tips helpful? And do you think that heavy tanks are the best tank class in World of Tanks? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. And as always, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. This really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you find this video extremely helpful, then feel free to support me via Super Thanks. This way you can make a one-time donation. You just have to click this button underneath the video. If you adore this channel and you want to consistently support me, then consider subscribing to my channel or become a member, once again with the click of a button underneath the video. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time in another World of Tanks video.